Greetings YouTube surfers, welcome back to Double Clutch Auto Reviews. Thank you so much again for tuning in for another review video. My name is Mark and today I'm going to give you guys a quick tour of this 2018 Mitsubishi Outlander Sport LE. This 2018 Outlander Sport has a 2-liter naturally aspirated inline 4-cylinder 16-valve engine with dual overhead camshafts and variable valve timing, making 148 horsepower and 145 pound-feet of torque. And that's mated to a CVT automatic or a continuously variable transmission and front-wheel drive. Fuel economy ratings are 24 miles per gallon in the city, 30 on the highway, and 27 miles per gallon average overall. With a 16.6 gallon fuel tank, estimated ranges between 400 and 500 miles on a full tank. Now let's talk acceleration. Whew. So from a dig, 0 miles an hour. It actually responds relatively quickly when you stomp the throttle, but it's more so of a jumpy jolt rather than actually like accelerating. And then as the engine winds up, it gets less and less impressive as time goes on. In my rough scientific testing, it is averaging around 11.9 seconds, 0 to 60.
3, 2, 1, go. Oh yeah. Come on, baby. 60. 11.9 again.
And then when you are already at speed, for instance on the highway, you stomp the throttle and that 145 horsepower all of a sudden feels like it has 45 horsepower. It is absolutely abysmal. It seems that the transmission is mostly to blame for this. As you can see, it takes about literally 2 seconds for me to stomp the throttle and then the engine to actually respond to my input. And then once it eventually starts going, the CVT just holds the RPMs right at 6,000 RPMs until you let off. And I understand that's where the CVT is utilizing the most power out of this engine, right at the top end of the power band. That makes sense. However, it just seems like the engine is going to blow up. Needless to say, the engine's performance is quite underwhelming in the Outlander Sport. That doesn't stop there though. The other performance aspects don't get much better than that. Let's be honest though, no one's thinking that this is a sports car. But what's really unfortunate about it though, is that with this small engine making relatively low horsepower in a relatively small car, you would think that you would get at least better fuel economy numbers than 30 on the highway. Not gonna lie, I'm a little bit disappointed about that. They're okay, but definitely not great, relatively speaking. On the contrary though, in regards to the sporty looks of this car, I actually think the exterior of this car looks quite good. Between the rather sharp exterior styling and the name Outlander Sport, this car is pretty much the embodiment of a misnomer. We'll start with the front end of this car. I think it looks great. It's aggressive and stylish, but not over the top, especially for a car like this. I'm not crazy about the way that this piece was designed though. It's actually not part of the hood. It's just this weird extra piece of bodywork, but not the biggest deal. The front grille and bumper look really good as well, with this wide, angry, open mouth look bordered by the chrome accents, daytime running lights, and the fog lights. Even the front splitter looks good. Moving on to the fenders, I am certainly not a fan of these tacked on fake fender vents. Anyone with a brain doesn't like anything riced out, let alone something riced out from the factory. If I had an Outlander Sport, first thing I would do is rip those things off with a screwdriver. But besides that, overall the side profile also looks good. It's well proportioned, and these 18-inch aluminum black alloy wheels also look really nice. Moving on to the rear end, it's also quite attractive looking for a small SUV like this. The rear spoiler also adds to the look. I don't know how much function it adds, but nonetheless, it doesn't take away from the look of this car. It ties it in nicely. The rear diffuser, on the other hand, definitely looks a little bit cheap, but nonetheless it's not that bad. It's there, and I think it fits this car. This one is also optioned with the Mitsubishi metal fuel door, which is definitely a little bit much for a car like this, but it doesn't look ridiculous. It's not that in your face, so I'll let that slide too. And now climbing into the interior of the 2018 Mitsubishi Outlander Sport. Interior room is decent overall, and the seats are decently comfortable. Certainly nothing special though. And pretty much as far as the eye can see is hard, black, creaky plastic. Not really a surprise there. In the gauge cluster, we have an analog tachometer and speedometer. We also have a very small center screen in the middle of the gauge cluster that shows your odometer, your temperature, your fuel gauge, and whatnot. You can cycle through it using this very chunky and quite cheap feeling info button. It's almost gaudy to look at. I don't know why they designed it like that. Rear seat passenger room is also pretty decent. I'm around 6 feet, 200 pounds. And I have no problem fitting back here. I'll show you now. I have a decent amount of legroom and headroom. I'm relatively comfortable. We also have a rear center armrest with 2 cup holders, which is nice, but no climate control vents or any other USB outlets back here. The max cargo capacity with all the seats folded down is 49.5 cubic feet, just under 50 cubic feet. That's not bad, but not the best in this segment either. The infotainment system is very basic, but intuitive enough. It has a 7-inch touchscreen, it's not too small, easy to use, responds well to my touch. This car does come with Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, which is nice. There's a USB port down here, so you can easily hook up your phone, of course. In the screen, you can see we have our music displayed and playing right now, and you can also have your navigation right to the side of it in this very small little square, but at least it's there nonetheless. Or you can just open it up to the navigation to the whole screen if you want to see it that way. Below our infotainment system, we have our heated seats, which is actually quite surprising, honestly. We also have one USB port, one 12-volt outlet, which is enough, two cup holders, and a small center console that has an additional 12-volt outlet. The sound system quality is relatively lame, unfortunately. It has 6 speakers total, 4 door speakers and 2 tweeters. It's not really rattly or anything like that. The problem is that there's absolutely no bass or low-end tones at all. So everything you're listening to just sounds really flat. And that's also with the equalizer adjusted properly. If you turn it up really loud though to try to get more out of it, it starts to get distorted. But just listening to it at a normal volume, there's no oomph behind the sound. To put it simply, the stereo works fine, Apple CarPlay and Android Auto work fine, but you're not going to be impressing anybody. Something else that I also noticed, this car does not have speed sensing volume control, which to be honest, in a 2018 model car, it's a little bit annoying that it doesn't have that. I didn't realize how good of a feature that was until I was in a car that didn't have it, and I have to say, definitely could have used it in a car this new. You can get speed sensing volume control in a 2018 Outlander Sport. However, it's an added option. I mean, come on, Mitsubishi. For what you're paying for this car, which I think is already on the high side for what you're getting already, you couldn't throw in speed sensing volume control. I think you're starting to rip off the customers a little bit now. However, the worst aspect of this vehicle, out of all these things I just mentioned, is by far, hands down, bar none, the build quality. I mean, it is just not there. And you can feel it everywhere in this car, unfortunately. From the uber cheap feeling interior with crappy plastic everywhere, the seat quality that's so-so, the mediocre resolution on the infotainment screen, and the worst of it all is all of these buttons and interior panels just seem to be so creaky and clunky and literally just almost seem like they're cracking underneath the pressure of your fingertips. It honestly does not feel good. I mean, listen to this. Listen to that creaking when I push down on these interior panels and these buttons. I'm sorry, that lack of quality control is just unacceptable in a 2018 model car, especially one with an MSRP even close to $20,000, let alone a few grand over it. If this car was $15,000 or less MSRP, for instance, I'd forgive all of it because you're getting what you're paying for, right? At that price point, all of these things make sense. And I don't know how this will translate on camera, but even just opening and closing the doors, you can feel the lack of sturdiness and lack of build quality. It is just like literally a tin can. A lot of this interior does not seem like it's going to hold up to the test of time at all. I'll say something positive for once in this video though. I do have to admit the steering wheel does feel relatively good in my hands though. It looks good as well. The buttons on it are very well laid out. They're intuitive with their placement as well as pretty much all the other buttons in this interior. Jumping in this car right off the bat, everything is very simple and it's easy to figure out how to operate everything. It just all seems super cut rate with the quality. And now let's talk driving experience, minus acceleration, of course. We already talked about that, even though that wasn't much to talk about. Nonetheless, we'll start with the wind, road, and tire noise. It isn't that well insulated, no surprise there, of course, but it is tolerable with the windows up. However, I have noticed if you have all of the windows down at once, you get some really bad wind buffeting. Now I know that in an SUV, sometimes if you roll the rear window down, just one, you get some pretty bad wind buffeting, but with all of them down, I feel like that shouldn't be that big of an issue. I feel like they have to do some more wind tunnel testing on this car, but I highly doubt they care about that. The engine noise is also really loud, especially under full throttle, but that's not that big of a deal to me personally. However, if someone's looking for a relatively quiet or serene driving experience, You're not gonna get that with this car. Between all the other noises that the car is letting into the interior, the engine noise seeps through pretty much at any RPM. The ride quality though is actually not that bad. This car was relatively comfortable on a long road trip. Bumps aren't punishing to your spine, yet in turn, pun intended, the car's suspension is very wallowy and wafty. And that's not at all in a comfortable riding on a cloud kind of way. More like a lumbering and floating through the corner, inspiring absolutely zero confidence in the driver. This puts an even further damper on the car's sportiness. The steering feel/feedback is also quite vague and numb. It feels indirect and it does not communicate that well to the driver in the middle of a corner. Contrarily, the on-center dead spot right in the center of the steering is actually not that bad at all. Maybe gives you about an inch of travel or less in either direction before your input translates to the road. It's actually quite good and surprising for what I was expecting. However, any benefit that responsiveness in the steering gives you is completely negated by the vast amount of body roll. I don't know how well this will translate on camera, but just look at this very slow corner. I mean, you could see the whole car pitch over. It is quite terrible, actually. The braking feel is satisfactory. I would not want someone trying to suddenly stop this car from a high speed. However, for daily driving, it'll suit you just fine. The ground clearance though for the Outlander Sport is actually quite impressive. 8.5 inches, that's fantastic. Great for snowy or off-roading driving, so that's definitely a plus. And now let's talk pricing. We glazed over it a little bit earlier, but now let's get down and dirty with the real numbers. The absolute base model you can get, the Outlander Sport ES trim with the 5-speed manual transmission, has a starting MSRP of $20,400. This one I'm showing you guys, the LE with front-wheel drive, starts over $22,600. The LE trim does come with most amenities that you would want out of a 5-passenger subcompact SUV. However, just based on what I was explaining earlier with the build quality, I do not think that it is worth that price at all. Mitsubishi should have either implemented a higher build quality standard or reduced the starting MSRP by at least a couple of $1,000s. I would truly, honestly expect that this LE with front-wheel drive should be starting in the mid to high teens to the most very low 20s, maxing out between $23,000 to $24,000 USD, fully specced out with all-wheel drive. Personally, my advice is I would not go for one of these Outlander Sports unless I found one for a screaming good deal with several thousands of dollars off the sticker price. If you still absolutely have to have an Outlander Sport though, and you want the most tricked out trim you can go with an SEL trim that has the 2.4 liter inline 4-cylinder engine, making a whopping 20 more horsepower at 168 horsepower and 167 pound-feet of torque. It also has a little bit nicer of an interior and some more creature comforts. Yet that trim of the Outlander Sport starts at just under $26,000. That is astronomical for what you're getting, in my opinion. At that price range, you are creeping well into the territory of many other brands of vehicles that have a much better build quality, much better driving experience, and driving dynamics overall. You also get better fuel economy, you also get similar if not more technologies and features, a much more comfortable and quiet ride, and generally a much better ownership experience overall. In conclusion, the Mitsubishi Outlander Sport is definitely not a great car, but it's not that bad if you can get it for a good price. You're probably all thinking what I just said was a bunch of baloney since I utterly bashed this car for most of this entire video. However, if you're looking for a 5-passenger subcompact SUV on a tight budget and you don't mind an overall cheaper feeling vehicle with lackluster performance, and it pretty much has every amenity that you need out of a modern car, not just want, but truly need, and it's relatively practical, has a decent amount of cargo space, and it's an overall relatively usable platform with a great warranty. Even though Hyundai and Kia can compare with their 10-year, 100,000-mile powertrain warranty, it is worth noting that Mitsubishi does have that as well. And the exterior styling is pretty sharp, but please make sure to get a sweet discount. Be a rock-solid strong negotiator on that price, and you may come out with a pretty decent car for the money. Anyways, guys, that wraps up my review of the 2018 Mitsubishi Outlander Sport LE. I hope I didn't offend anyone too badly that already owns an Outlander Sport. I did bash the car a lot, yes, but I want to be honest with you guys, and I truly was not that impressed with this car, especially for how much it costs. I feel like there are several better options out there, including some Kias and Hyundais that are certainly worth the money over the Mitsubishi. I hope you all enjoyed the video, and I hope you learned something, and if you did, please consider liking and subscribing to the channel. I really appreciate it. It really helps me out to grow, and it means a lot to me. Take care, guys. Stay safe out there, and I'll see you on the next one. Have a great rest of your day. Peace.